I want to answer a question I was recently asked, whose answer I think is more timely than ever before. The question is, how can we as animal advocates ask people to support animal rights when there are so many violations of human rights happening around the world at this time? This question is not coming from someone who is trying to catch me as an animal advocate and say, how could you care about animals and not humans and you are anti-human? It's not coming from that place. It's coming from someone who is an animal advocate herself, who has dedicated her life to helping both humans and non-humans. Perhaps she is grappling with this question herself. Perhaps she's been asked this question. Perhaps she is anticipating the question and preparing an answer for it. But whatever the motivation for the question, I want to answer it, and I want to answer it publicly. Perhaps you have heard this question. Perhaps you are asking this question. The question itself breaks my heart a little bit because it rests on the premise that human issues and non-human issues are distinct from one another, that we have to choose between one or the other, that we have to be discerning about who receives our compassion and who doesn't. It rests on the premise that having compassion for more than one being at a time, more than one person at a time, more than one species at a time requires something more of us, something that we don't have, something that would be depleted if we gave too much of it away. And the reason this breaks my heart is because compassion isn't finite. Compassion isn't limited. We can care about more than one thing at a time. We can care about more than one being at a time, more than one person at a time, more than one species at a time, more than one issue at a time. We have an unlimited capacity for compassion and mercy and kindness and empathy. We are not going to run out. Not only do we not have to choose between one issue or another, one person or another, one species or another, not only do we not have to choose, but it's precisely that notion that we have to ration our compassion that stops us from being the most compassionate people we can be. It stops us from creating the most compassionate world we can create. We have the capacity, we have the ability, but in thinking that way, we actually hinder ourselves. We actually hinder the very thing we know is needed. Because what's the ask? In a question like that, how can we ask people to have more compassion for animals when there's human suffering? What's the ask, really? To include animals in their circle of compassion? In what way? How? When they're praying, when they're meditating, when they're talking, when they're thinking? What's the cost of that? There is no cost of that. We don't pay a price when we seek to cultivate more compassion. We pay a price when we withhold compassion, and we all withhold compassion every single day, both consciously and unconsciously. Consciously, when we say something like that person doesn't deserve compassion because, name it, because of their politics, their religion, because of their bad behavior. And unconsciously, when we say something like, there are too many human issues in this world to address. Once we figure those out and take care of those, then we'll address the animal issues. What that reveals to me is that we completely don't understand that compassion and the lack of compassion is the foundation of all of our actions and all of our decisions every single day in this world. Violations against human rights and violations against animal rights both stem from lack of compassion. The solution isn't to focus on the violations, isn't to focus on the lack. That's the mistake we make when we say something like, we'll take care of the human issues first, and then we'll address the animal issues. That's focusing on the effect rather than on the cause. The cause is the lack of compassion. It doesn't matter who the victim is. They're just the effect of that lack. And so the solution is to fill that lack, to fill that void. Compassion fills that void. It fills that lack. Compassion is the remedy. Where there is the absence of compassion means there is a need for more compassion, not less. We know this anecdotally, and we know this through research, that the more compassion we generate and demonstrate and cultivate, the more compassion we create and the more compassion we experience. In acting more compassionately, in just widening our circle of compassion, we create more compassion. So for me, the question isn't how can we ask people to consider animals when there are so many human issues to consider? For me, the question is how can we not? How can we not ask of each other to be more compassionate, to be more merciful, to be more kind, to widen our circle of compassion? And that doesn't take much more than just orienting to that wishing that beings didn't suffer. We don't have to do anything in order to manifest that, because our perceptions shape our reality. For the animals, both human and non-human, this is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thank you for watching.